Here is to you a small appreciation, token of appreciation. We'll start with the king here. Then the front here. Right. To another king. Thank you. To the queen, it's all queens now. Another queen. Thank you.
Ufacilitator wethu usemsebenzini so izomeqa lapho indaba yezipho. Mr. Simandi, sir, please come on stage. I don't think Mr. Apple Green is still with us, from what I can tell. But we're not even going to sit down for this feedback session. You've had the pleasure of, Singobile, if you can also just join us. Ladies and gentlemen, you've had the pleasure this afternoon of listening to the parallel sessions that have been hosted by the two fantastic facilitators next to me. Myself, I also hosted one, and Mr. Apple Green. We were due to give quite a detailed feedback to the audience this afternoon, but I am quite mindful of time. But I'm going to turn it into a challenge for each of us. I know that Paul definitely had a lot of interest. He had a full house as well, as did I. Singobile, you had this whole plenary as well. And Eric's session was so engaging that people sat for about a full hour with that. And I think our challenge is actually going to be putting some of that thought leadership down and hand it over to the city, and in terms of what came up as some of those themes. And I think our contribution as thought leaders, as business people, will be to really then say, how do we take the questions, the agenda items that came, and make 3 recommendations to the city in terms of how the city, the business people, the Resurgence themselves can catalyze the ideas and the strength of what came from our conversations into challenge accepted on our part. I think we can definitely do that, because I know Paul's session alone, I would be remiss to cut the type of feedback you received. But I know that you said to me, you need to give me 2 minutes, because we've heard the feedback from that one. I did one on urban regeneration. But I think when we're talking about capacity and education in particular, and how we build from the ground up, Paul, I think it's important for you to give us just a very quick recap on that burning issue you wanted to give us before we create that feedback report with our recommendations.
All right, no, thank you. Thank you, Lynette, and thank you to all the panelists, and thank you for having us. I think it was important for us, and in the context of, I'm a fast learner, I heard that we can't say quick wins.
Yes.
And I heard that we must speak really in terms of what's going to happen. So in terms of immediate sustainable opportunities. So from that perspective, I think one of the things that came strongly from our panel was that Moses Kotane Institute do have a program where they support people who need to be skilled in artificial intelligence, but also just the protection of their intellectual property and those kinds of things. There is a program, there are roadshows that are going to be happening, and the idea is then how do we pair that with this particular process so that we can also create partnerships to enable skill. Why skill? Because it became clear that to the extent that we want to connect opportunities and the individuals that are looking for opportunities, we need to process an immense amount of data across networks with a lot of skill. And the key enabler is the skill, and that is the skill that must be developed. Now, in conclusion, the key word that I would raise is the word responsibility. There was a responsibility on the part of the people that need to learn how to access these opportunities. But there's also a responsibility in how they access that information, because the cyber world is a world of cybersecurity. It is a tricky world, and with artificial intelligence, it has become a minefield. So in conclusion, coming from here, we are asking the city to kindly assist as we facilitate an ongoing session of focusing on capacitating people with the skills to take advantage of artificial intelligence so that we can facilitate cross-border trade.
Thank you so much, sir, for that. It's so succinct. I chaired one, you were there, in fact, when I was chairing the session on urban regeneration, and everybody just talking about their experiences of development, but also their experience of services in eThekwini. And it all came down to that. We have the policy, we have the architecture, we have some of the structures in place, we don't have capacity. And the barriers to that capacity is that we do not have people who are skilled in a nature to be responsive to today's problem, whereas even though some of these problems and the structural problems that we face are a historical, side effect, some of them are coming out of uncontrollable events, things like climate resilience, migration, that is also happening, but it ultimately came down to that we have to skill, but also re-skill to be responsive to what the future needs next. So I think our responsibility will start with ourselves. Our responsibility is to prepare those recommendations and hand them over to the powers that be, so that it's not just talk, but we take all the reflections that came with and we present them so that people can immediately go and act on those things, and we can see them undo the capacity and the potential people know already exists. So thank you so much to my panel facilitators. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point in the afternoon, please may I call to the stage, firstly, is also just to welcome back Ubaba wethu wedolobha. Welcome back, Your Worship, and thank you for joining us for this session this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, if I can please now call to the stage the former Vice President of the Republic of Zambia, Mr. Mumba, to deliver a keynote address to us. We started yesterday saying that we needed to shift a needle. We started yesterday saying that we are the holders of the keys to the future. I don't know how many of you have traveled perhaps to the nation of Zambia, but it's a country I love dearly, because not only was it supportive to South Africa in its dark times, but it remains a big SADC partner to South Africa, even in now our lighter and brighter times. Please make your way on, sir. I'm actually just giving you time and space to come on. And is a country that at this point in time has far more cranes in the sky than we do, and is doing some pretty amazing things at the forefront of economic rejuvenation in the SADC region. So, former Vice President, welcome to South Africa. It's an absolute pleasure and an honor to have you with us, and we look forward to your delivery. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, give her a hand. Thank you. Well, the program director, Your Worship, the Mayor, Councillor Cyril Kaba, I'm learning how to pronounce that. I'm doing pretty good. The co-host, Reverend Dennis Dillon, the vision bearer of the Resurgence 24 Conference. The co-host, City Manager, Mr. Musa Mbele. I must pause here for a moment. We are to be hosted, and it has been such a wonderful experience for us to be with you on this particular occasion, and we honor the mayor and also the city manager and their entire team. May I also recognize my fellow speakers that are here, many of you, and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. there's a little negative about myself, and that is I combine two very opposing callings. I am a pastor, which is not a negative, but I'm also a politician. Both of them are useful, except when it comes to speaking. A politician takes time, the pastor preaches by the Spirit, and that combination can be lethal in terms of the length of time. So basically, in order to save you from that catastrophe, I've decided to read my notes so that I can share my heart with you without veering into preaching a red-hot gospel message right here. 60 years ago, most of Africa and its resources were owned and managed by colonizing nations. The United Kingdom, France, Portugal, Spain, Germany, Holland, and many others. The black African had no direct access to his God-given wealth. Africans waged a relentless fight for political freedom. One after the other, African nations attained their political freedom, and today we're able to say that all of Africa is politically free. Unfortunately, economic power has taken long to be transferred into black hands. The colonizers had preserved for themselves superior education, which enabled them to extract the resources, refine them, and send them to the European capitals to develop their own nations. While political transfer was fast, knowledge transfer has not been so fast. This is what brings us here today to Durban, to make this economic transition possible. It is our considered view that at 60, Africa is now ready to completely own and exploit its own resources. Today marks the economic resurgence for Africa against all odds. My assignment is to show the progress that Africa has made in 60 years of fighting to reclaim what has always been ours. Our efforts to educate the African population, the adoption and refining of the democratic system of electing our leaders, and how both education and democracy impact on equitable investment policies meant to benefit Africans first. The 60-year journey has been torturous, unforgiving, and painful for the African people. But now time has come for Africa to turn pain into prosperity. Now we can decide who we trade with and how much we should sell our commodities. This is Africa's time. And I have heard with keen interest the submissions of so many of us here today. You could sense that frustration because we know what our problem is. We've talked about it over and over again, but time has come for now to put, like we have all said here today, somebody to push this needle so that it starts to move forward. We can't continue to complain. We must get down to work and become what we know we should become. For 60 years, let me talk about my own country. For 60 years, Zambia has concentrated on the education of its people. I want to talk about education and how it impacts on economic emancipation. At independence, Zambia only had 100 university graduates to manage the development of the new nation. At the end of Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, our first president, at the end of his reign in 1991, Zambia had graduated 35,000 from the University of Zambia. Today, Zambia's graduate population ranks supremely high in the region. This guarantees an investor with professional personnel to handle any business investment with distinction. Zambia continues to invest heavily in education. The current government of our president, Hakainde Hichilema, has reintroduced free education at great cost to the nation. Yes, education is costly, but not as costly as ignorance. There is a story For whatever it's worth, there is a story that is told about ICU patients who kept dying on this particular bed in the ICU ward. It doesn't matter what the condition was, but every morning at 7 o'clock, whosoever they put in that place would die. And that problem, with whatever that story is worth, I think it talks about what I want to explain today. Until one day they decided that, look, people are dying on this bed. What could be the problem? So doctors gathered in the morning before 7 o'clock to sort of, including pastors and prophets, to sort of find out and figure out what devil is taking these people at 7 o'clock every morning. Well, the story goes that an old lady, a cleaner, walks into that ICU ward who cleans the floor, and she moves over to the place where the life support system was plugged. She unplugs it and puts her phone there to be charged. Yes, you can laugh, but I want you to understand that ignorance is not only costly, but it's also deadly. Education, however, is life's equalizer. And that is why education must be one of our major priorities in the African context if we are going to compete with the global community. From a bare-footed schoolboy in a remote village, I used to go to school on foot climbing a steep mountain every morning. But because of education that was offered to me as free education by our first president, Kenneth Kaunda, I ended up becoming an international evangelist, traveling in so many parts of the world, so many countries of the world. I became an ambassador to Canada and the Caribbean islands, and in Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago. I was an ambassador in Cuba. From a boy that walked barefooted, but because of the availability of education, I was able to become all that. I became a leader, I've been a leader of observer missions, monitoring democratic elections on the African continent. I also had the privilege and the honor given to me to be Vice President of the Republic of Zambia, from a bare-footed villager. It explains to us that education is something we must fight for our people. I've listened to the submissions by some of these people, how articulately they speak, how intelligently they analyze our problem. Without education, they would not have that confidence. And the biggest problem of Africa is that we lack confidence because a lot of our people lack education. And I think that as we seek to see the resurgence of whatever we've got, education must be at the top of this agenda. From a barefooted boy, like I've said, education reminds us of our intrinsic value and worth. We still have a huge challenge to ensure that we educate the African population, but we are better today than we have ever been before. We give credit to our founding fathers, Kenneth Kaunda of Zambia, Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya, Nelson Mandela of South Africa, and many others who chose the way of education for the deprived Africans. Our founding fathers understood that an ignorant population was a recipe for state failure and enhanced poverty for its people. This stubborn fact remains true today, as it did at that time. Several years later, Zambia achieved one of the highest levels of literacy in the region. With a rising level of university graduates, the nation was able to export teachers to surrounding nations that got their political independence much later. As you are aware, Zambia, led by Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, spent most of his presidency fighting for the liberation of Southern Africa. Kenneth Kaunda was called a crying president because wherever he spoke internationally, he would never speak without talking about Nelson Mandela's freedom. And not only did he talk about it, he always wept when he came to the subject of Nelson Mandela. Because his commitment and Zambia's commitment was to ensure that Africa, yes, needs to be free, but after our freedom, we need to invest in our people with education in order for us to govern ourselves away from the spirit of poverty. Ladies and gentlemen, Unfortunately, with the changing or the declining economic fortunes, free education was discontinued as we embraced a free market economy in 1991. This move resulted in declining educational standards amongst many Zambians. This eventually gave rise to a drug culture which is destroying huge numbers of our young people. This picture is true not just for Zambia, but for many African nations. But let's talk about this relevant education quickly. While general education is the basis for any enlightened society, relevant education is the one that leads into systematic development of a society. Relevant education entails that every individual is allowed to perform a vital function in maintaining balance and social equilibrium for the continuity of society. Every African country must start to write its own songs, its own stories, and must develop curriculums that reflect the needs of its society. It is true, we have learned so much from the foreigners, to the extent that instead of us singing songs about Durban and Shaka and also about the king of the Zulus, we are so quick to sing songs about the kings of foreigners and London Bridge and all those things that have nothing to do with us. And if you don't mention London Bridge in your answers in an examination, you can't progress further. Who cares about London Bridge before we care about Johannesburg Bridge between Johannesburg and Pretoria? Time has come to recalibrate our own education system. And a lot of us have talked about that. And this is an urgency. It's an urgent emergency. We should not just talk about it. Let's relook at this education. The education that we inherited from the British, the French, and the Portuguese had its place, but it is grossly insufficient to resolve our issues. We must domesticate all education on the African continent if we are to pull ourselves out of this quagmire of backwardness. Ladies and gentlemen, the greatest casualty, and you might say, why do we talk about education when we're talking about economic emancipation? I want to talk about how education, or lack of it, and democracy affect how far we can go in improving the quality of life on the African continent. The greatest casualty of a disillusioned and uneducated population is the concept of democracy. Democracy operates on the principle of choice, to have the freedom to choose your preferred leader, your preferred political party, your preferred associates, and your preferred speech. Democracy was not originally designed for uneducated people or uninformed or ignorant people, but an educated and enlightened population. To make a good choice, the quality of information one has on the matter that is being decided upon. In order to have and appreciate quality information, one has to have adequate education. It is because of this that democracy seems to be faltering on the African continent for some reason. In the interest of time, let me limit my presentation to the democratic electoral process, an area that I'm privileged to have some reasonable knowledge about. There's a huge difference between a leader chosen by poor and uneducated voters and a leader chosen by educated and enlightened voters. Most uneducated people have little comprehension of electoral issues at play. They are unable to connect their suffering to the poor choices they make. Most of them live in the moment. They are gullible to the lies of witty conmen of politicians. They give them little cash and promise them more if they choose to vote for them. Most political leaders prefer an ignorant, uneducated electorate as they become tools for pivoting them into power. This is our crisis. Over the past few years, I was watching the American debate. I know you don't want to talk about it because of, all that has come out of it, but between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And as I was listening to that debate, away from everything else, all I want to talk about is the fact that Americans listen to the debate to the extent that they actually can make a decision not to vote for you based on what you have not said or what you have said. In Africa, it doesn't matter what you say and what you don't say. As long as you can give them some money to go and buy the next meal, you have their vote. We have to change that because success of nations depends on the quality of leadership that African nations begin to put into office. We must insist on ensuring that we put leaders of courage, morality, and integrity to be able to make decisions on behalf of the millions that are on this continent. We do not place premium on leadership in Africa, and that is why we are in our current state. You are saying to us, well, Dr. Mumba, don't talk about democracy and politics. Let's just talk about economic emancipation. There is no economic emancipation in the absence of quality leadership on this continent. There will be no investment that will make sense because you will bring $200 million to invest in some solar project in Africa and the people in power will steal it. These are the problems that we are talking about. It is for us to work together to ensure that we polish up the democratic process that we have in place in order to ensure that we place premium on the leadership that we place in the offices of African nations. It is critical and it is urgent. Over the past few years, African democracy has stumbled greatly. In West Africa, several countries have removed democratically elected governments and replaced them with military. In other countries like Kenya and others, the youth are disillusioned by their own choices which they made only yesterday. Within a year or two, the Gen Z called generation is ready to change democratically elected governments using street demonstrations. This is the time to rethink the type of democracy that we must employ in moving forward. Maybe there is something missing in the kind of democracy that we are using. Democracy is not an American asset. Democracy has a Greek origin from Greece. America got it, perfected it, and used it for themselves. But not only did they use it in its original form, and that's one thing I love about America. America is not afraid to innovate. You give them something, they look at it. If it doesn't fit their shoe, they don't use it in exactly the same way. So they changed democracy. It's no longer one man, one vote in the United States. They use the Electoral College, but it's still called democracy. But that's what suits them. Africa needs to start to rethink about what type of democracy really will work for us. We must be innovative. The kind of democracy we have today in Africa is not bringing African nations together. It's dividing the nations. It's bringing violence. It's bringing disunity because we need to shape it in a manner that it gives us what we want, and that is development and economic emancipation, and it can only come if there is unity in the nation. The new leadership poised to bring change to Africa, as I close, must first understand that this current world order is rigged against Africa. We have under-negotiated around the global roundtable. Africa lost the fight in 1884 when we were exempted from the Berlin Conference, which divided Africa into more than 54 pieces and delivered them to European nations. It has taken us 2 millennia to start finding ourselves politically. Both our governance systems and economies are controlled from outside ourselves. The managers of the global system to which we belong hold the key to our daily existence. They can lock or unlock our economic systems at will. They can raise a government in Africa today, and they can bring it down the following day. Let me talk about this now as I close, because I'm very passionate about this. It is this scenario, ladies and gentlemen, that we are determined to change. Not tomorrow, but today. African people must be free to elect their own leaders and must be free to fully control their own resources. Not tomorrow, but today. We must be free to express ourselves on any global roundtable without intimidation, not tomorrow, but today. While we may not be able to change the global order today, we believe we can start on a journey to create an alternative homegrown system of sustainability as a continent. We need to create a default mechanism which will allow Africa to continue to live in the event that the global managers decide to switch off power. Africa, like many other third world countries, cannot survive if the satellites which control our daily lives are knocked out of space or deactivated for control purposes. If the global internet is switched off, our economies, health services, social lives, and communications will collapse in a day. I don't know whether you experienced a blackout of Facebook a couple of months ago, or whether that was just for Zambia, but Facebook went off for 45 minutes for us, and it was a panic of a lifetime by the entire nation. And this is what I am talking about. So we are not in charge of our destiny, because somebody can switch it off in Washington, and all of us go into a panic. And I want to address that in the next 2-3 minutes. We are dependent on the internet to run our economies and our lives. We are more enslaved today than we were 2 millennia ago. We have lost our freedoms of choice, speech, association, and all the God-given freedoms. We are at the mercy of a central global intelligence that can harvest our future in one stroke. Africa must lead the way in creating what I have devised and called a generator or genset system of survival. When electric energy goes off because of load shedding in our country, it's not every home that loses power. Other homes remain uninterrupted because they have invested in a genset or a generator. So while everybody is complaining there is no power, there are those that have already planned ahead and they have a genset in times of blackouts. Africa needs to create a genset society that cannot be switched off from Washington or Moscow. Our default system should immediately kick in when the global system collapses or if it is weaponized against us. We should still have our commerce running. Services like water and electricity must be running. Internal trading must continue. Agriculture must not be affected. We must enjoy food security and state national security. We must become absolute owners of all our natural resources in order to have a voice in the global and on the global round table. To achieve this, we must create a new continent which thinks differently from the past. A continent conscious of its wealth and worth. A continent which believes in the intelligence and resilience of its people. A continent confident enough to believe we can transform our natural resources into finished products for the benefit of its citizens. A continent that is fully in control of its own resources and its destiny. As I close, I share this because I know a lot of you read the book called the Bible. There's a story I don't understand there, and I've been preaching for 45 years. It's a story of a situation between Israel and fighting with the Philistines. A war was declared. When they were getting ready to go to war, it was found out that the children of Israel could not really use any weapons because they didn't have any blacksmiths in Israel. In order for them to sharpen their swords of war, they had to go in the enemy country or city to go and sharpen their weapons of war so that they can fight against the Philistines. It doesn't make any sense to me, but they had no Philistines to prepare their weapons of war. Africa finds herself in that condition, that we don't have blacksmiths amongst ourselves. If we want to learn more about democracy, we fly to Washington. If we want to learn something, we go somewhere else. And that is why we can't say no to the superpowers or anybody. Because the simple example I would give as I sit down, my humble submission, we can't say no to America, we can't say no to the Western powers, because if we start a war with America, the problem we have is that we can declare it in our parliaments that we are now at war with the United States and jump into our jets, our fighter jets, to go and fight the Americans. Unfortunately, the jets are made by Americans. So all they do is jam everything because they have all the serial numbers, and therefore you have no blacksmith. You have to go and iron it with your enemy. So basically the point we are trying to make, Africa, time has come. And the only way we're going to have a voice is to become absolute owners of our resources and be in charge of every decision made about our resources. I thank you and God bless you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the revolution, they said, would be televised, but I think the revolution will also be digitized. And the revolution, ladies and gentlemen, is ours to take forward. And I think, again, we've been challenged again. Thank you so much to the former Vice President, Mumba, of the Republic of Zambia, for really outlining the thing and taking us straight to the thing, capacity. And that human potential, we are human potential. We often like to say, oh, I'm seated in traffic. We are traffic. We are the system. We are the potential, the capacity, and the hands who have the power and just need to follow it up with will and make it happen. Thank you so much for your words this afternoon. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now cruising down to the close of our conference. I'm acutely aware that it is now 5 o'clock. There was a session that we were due to have where there would be some thoughts that would be shared by some of our guests who are with us and have joined us, our visiting delegates. Ms. Laura, Doctor, I know a number of you had some thoughts that you wish to share. But I think it's incredibly, and Mr. Tulani Muneyera, Ms. Laura Hall, but I think first it is incredibly important that we finalize the real business of the day, and then we can stay still and share some of those reflections and new, fresh ideas that are also coming and any questions. So I'd like to call, to the stage at this point, really to help us with the roadmap and give us the final deliberations of the day that will articulate for us what are the resolutions, what are the actions that must result from this particular conference, and how do we take on the baton of turning the discussion of opportunity all the way through to actual practice, because I think that has perhaps been the biggest demand of today. If I can then call up to the stage, is the Senator back? I cannot see him under the lights. Is he here? The Senator, Senator James? He's already gone. Thank you so much. If I can then call pardon? Where? Ah, there he is. Senator, don't hide. Under the bright lights, I can't see into the crowd sometimes. And just to join him on stage, please may I call the city manager, Mr. Musambele, as well as Reverend Dennis Dillon, the co-convener of the Resurgence Conference as well. Pardon? You're seated on your mic? You are sitting on your mic? Okay, thank you. All right. Senator, do you have a mic? Okay, fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, the roadmap. Senator, they had indicated to us that you would give us some final thoughts just based on your observation of the last day in Durban. I know you are shattered. A combination of jet lag at this point and such a full program and activity. And so I thought instead of getting you up to give us a whole speech, I'd send in support in the form of the two gentlemen between us. But if you can just give us your closing remarks very briefly, and then I will allow the city manager as well as the co-convener of the Resurgence Conference to articulate the roadmap and give us our closing remarks. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you, of course, for doing such a great job at emceeing.
Thank you. Thank you.
To the mayor and the city manager, such boldness to try to come together and bring international minds to deal with an age-old problem, a problem that was here way before you were, and will not be resolved immediately. So, but it's bold that you have brought together such people. I congratulate you. To the Reverend and to all of our distinguished guests, it's been an honor to be in your presence. I was inspired by the Vice President, of course. His words of liberation we need to take to heart. And I would suggest to you that there's a saying in the West where they say, think globally, but act locally. We should think wide and we should speak of freedom and we must. But freedom is waged by what you do every day. If you don't do something every day, something small, you will not get to that place. Now, I served time in the military, and I know that before any war is put together, they first put supplies together. I'm talking about those who win. They put supplies together. They put strategy together. They put things in place. I was speaking to our beloved pastor and speaking of, imagine if Durban were the place where the international African community decides to put most of their time and talent. Imagine if this were a place where we said, let us try all of our strategies towards liberation here. It would need a progressive things. There are things that the business world in the West, the black business world would want to see and want to know, and I'm anxious to discuss those things with you. If this is the time and this is the place, then we need to speak of many different things, including first and foremost, access to capital. You've got to figure out how to fund these things. And secondarily, a vision. What is our vision? And of course, a government of clean hands, a government that is determined to serve the people and not be served by the people. A government that is saying that we are going to live on our salaries, as meager as they are, and I'm speaking about my own. We're going to live on our salaries and we're going to live like the people, and we're not going to put the people's money into our accounts in Europe. We're going to make sure that the people's money benefit the people through schools, through hospitals, through housing, those type of things. So I'm anxious to have those conversations of what we can do small, doable, what we can do now and tomorrow, but very small, because freedom doesn't come in one big block. You can't just get up there and say, as of Monday, August the 5th, we will be free. Because we would have said that a long time ago. It's the small, bitter steps that we're going to have to take, and that, but you know what? Pardon me. Everybody in this room knows it. In your heart of hearts, you know it already. And since it chokes me up just saying it, I will turn over the mic.
Thank you very much, Senator. I think, definitely as part of that roadmap, not just capital. I think what we established, ladies and gentlemen, as well, and it kept popping up right throughout the day, is this discussion around pension funds and the amount of money that exists in them, but also that capital is available. The problems I think we have around it is restrictive models, access to information that leads us to correctly use instruments, and matching it with bankable products to actually take and support us going forward. So deeper than the money itself, it's is going to be us really thinking at that level, and of course cementing what we started the day with yesterday was a vision that is grounded in proper identity, and then fearlessly taking out and branding it as this is who we aim to be, and this is how we aim to share value rather, and lead ourselves and others in service to mankind. Gentlemen, our roadmap. City Manager, I think as our host, I'm going to allow you to close, but Reverend Dylan, if you can give us your closing remarks and thoughts, that what happens after this?
So a couple of key steps that I want to talk about. Number one, I'm going to stand with the senator and make a very strong suggestion that we seriously look at how the delegation that came from the U.S. and the Caribbean can really begin to work with Durban and this greater Durban area around really creating a Black American hub in Durban. This has worked successfully in many, many places, many other places. I think it would be quite strategic if we kind of take this to the next level. So I want to hold us to that, Senator. Second thing I want to say, and I believe that this is one of the most critical areas for Black people, not just here in Durban and in South Africa, but certainly across the globe. We have to get the banks to lend us our money. Now that is key. So I want to be specific. I don't want to talk around the issues, because when we do, we're going to find ourselves just talking around the issues for a lot of years. So I'm going to suggest that there's the coordination, particularly around faith leaders, coming together with some key business leaders, and we have to create a strategy and a system that will literally force the banks to give us our money. That's the only way it happened in America, and I believe that that's the only way it's going to happen in South Africa. When we start organizing, I remember a couple of years ago when we challenged, I organized a couple hundred people, and we went to the headquarters at Chase Bank, Citibank, Chemical Bank, during their period when they were trying to merge. And we challenged them that we're going to move our money. They didn't believe us. And when we decided that we're going to come together and move our money out of the bank, all of a sudden it became a national storm. And out of that initiative, 20-something years ago, when the bank merged and became J.P. Morgan Chase, their first commitment to the communities was $18 billion. We charged them and challenged them to invest in home ownership, providing mortgage loans, small business loans, and the like, and so we begin to see that revolution. Now, when we look at Standard Bank and Absa Bank and Capitec and Nedbank and F&B and all the other banking institutions in South Africa unless we put some pressure on these banks to lend us our money. We will not get it. So I would suggest a very organized, coordinated approach around this. And what we did, our strategy specifically was to put in place an activist group on the ground, in the streets, working on this from that grassroots perspective. Number two, we had a PR team that was publicizing what the bank was not doing. And thirdly, we had a boardroom group that was now sitting in the boardroom negotiating with these banks to make sure the deals get done. I'm going to suggest that we do that, and what better place to start that as in Durban. Out of that should be the outgrowth, since this was talked about. And there should be pre-conversations at the highest level of business, civic, community organizations, and government leaderships around the formation and the creation of a black-owned bank and indigenous banks, and what better place to start that than Durban. I'd be more than happy to bring some of the leaders on the US side who have done this so that we could look at how we do this. Finally, I think we should elevate this to another level around economic sanctions. There is nothing wrong with economic sanctions. To whom you give your money is to whom you give your power.
True.
I'm going to say that one more time. To whom you give your money is to whom you give your power. Give it to Checkers, that's who have your power. Give it to Click, that's who have your power. Give it to all of the other organizations. Give it to Fisherways or Ocean Basket, that's who you're giving your power to. So we have to look at the dynamics and how do we shift that so that we are creating more businesses to give our power to ourselves. And on that note, I'll be more than happy again, as we're talking about this, organizing specific business leaders on this side, on the ground, to work with business leaders on the other side so that we can effect one of these. Clergy, and I just want to maybe at the end probably just have a quick powwow with all the clergy leaders in the room. If when we're done, if we could meet kind of over in this corner. I don't know if Dr. Ponter is still in the house. But the fact that 20-something years ago, these clergy leaders came in a room and they decided that they're going to start this movement that has now built 6,000 affordable housing units. Those are the kind of initiative, clergy, that you're going to have to take charge of and spearhead in as well.
Thank you so much for those words. Practice, that's our word. We practice, we gather people right now in this room and organize. Thank you so much. You may. Yes, you closing. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Thank you very much, Program Director, Master of Ceremonies, everything good that you are. Thank you very much, my sister. You have handled it so well. I'm going to say what we commonly say in South Africa, that protocol is observed, so that I don't start again greeting. It's 5:20. So protocol is observed. Just before I give the closing remarks, I just want to highlight a couple of action points, Lynette, that we've set down as a team, because a lot of questions were being raised by people saying, where to from here? The gentleman with a hat, I don't see him now, he was saying all this will boil down to being a nice talk if we don't have very clear action areas that we want to pin down and say this is what we are going to do. Number one, we have agreed that We are going to have an African empowerment think tank, which is made up of representatives from different cities in the mother continent and in the diaspora, representing 1.9 billion African people in the globe, that is going to be formed under the auspices of the Resurgence, that is going to monitor trends, deal with hindrances in different aspects of trade, conduct research, look at behavioral issues, do some tough love to our African brothers and sisters. Tough love as simple things like if you have a conference paid up by public purse, you sit up to the end of the conference. I think I've attended a couple of conferences hosted by the Chinese, hosted by the Indian government. I see a different approach. Need not I say more, but I think it's important that as Africans, we do an introspection. We look at those things that, are we really going to win this war? The Afrikaners had what they call a broederbond, whatever that meant. They had a very clear plan of how they were going to subjugate us and drive this agenda of sidelining African people. They were very focused. They stayed till the meetings ended. The Chinese had a 100-year plan from the days of Mao Zedong. They ensured that they stick to it. There was a think tank behind it that was driving it. That is what we are essentially propagating. Point number 2. There are those 67 learners that were identified yesterday, a very phenomenal act of commitment to African transformation. We are basically saying we want to see those that have been adopted by our kind African brothers and sisters. We want to support that in every way possible. See to it that those learners become the leaders of Resurgence in the future. We are now breeding our own to whom we will pass on the baton, and there must be a very clear program of how we are going to do that to ensure that we support them. Number 3, almost every African who is here knows exactly from literature and engagement in different fora what are the barriers to entry that cause us not to make it in the business world. We all know. But we may probably not be very clear about how to navigate it such that we tend that to become the advantage. So we need that information put together. There are different experiences in different parts of the globe. If you have the banks in the context of South Africa redlining Africans, which is something that we have had being said here, what is it that we are going to do to deal with that? What is the story in America? What is the story in Jamaica? What is the story in Tobago and Barbados? What is the story in Brazil? So we need to put together that research, you want to call it a paper or a research information that is going to guide us, which will be the basis for a proper situational analysis on why we fail. Is it institutionalized? Is it a behavioral inadequacies on our side? Or is it a combination of different factors? What are they and how do we deal with them? The issue of number 4, the issue of funding has been spoken about at great length. There are different institutions that are here. We have had the Development Bank of Southern Africa, our own development bank. We had invited our representatives from African Bank. We need to start saying, really, these are the projects that we are going to target. Because when I travel to different parts of the world, people are saying, South Africa, you don't submit applications. We don't receive anything from South Africa. Where are your projects? Where are your projects? So it's important that we must have that put together, a multi-sectoral project which targets specifically black-owned businesses, which will ultimately lead to the emancipation of Africans economically. Number 6, we need to start engaging the whole of government and its institutions around supporting a targeted investment into African-owned enterprises by the American companies across the various sectors. What export incentives are there? Who accesses them? How can they be broadened to benefit African-owned enterprises? So we need to focus on that specifically. And I'm talking about the quick wins. I can't run away from the quick wins. Otherwise, we'll start losing the momentum. Number 7, we need to share good and positive stories. We have success stories of our African brothers who have made it to the international markets from this continent. We were supposed to have Mr. Twala, Laduma Twala, who is the brains behind Amaxhosa clothing brand. They have chain stores in the United States. They have made it there. So we are not starting from the scratch. They are our own people who have made it there. Let's share those positive stories. Let them identify companies in those sectors that they can nurture so that they handhold them into success that they themselves have attained. Number 8, to provide financial support and other means to the successful companies to incubate a handful of African-owned enterprises in a model similar to the Alta Sea model that we saw in the United States, in Los Angeles. Number 9, to make Africa Procurement Indaba Conference, which is scheduled to take place on the 6th to the 9th of November this year, to become the launch pad for practicalizing the strategies that we have agreed upon at the Resurgence. Otherwise, if you wait for next year's Resurgence, it's too big a gap. We need to keep the momentum going. And we have a big conference looking at how we can maximize ocean-based economy for the benefit of our African people. Last but one, Program Director. We need to create an electronic repository of bankable business plans from ordinary Africans across the globe for continuous processes and further engagement, thereby laying the sound basis for next year's conference here in Durban in 2025, next Resurgence Conference. I've met a lot of our brothers and sisters who are saying, I have this business plan, I've tried different people, they've turned me down, what can I do? You will have an opportunity where all those business plans will be processed. You will have a team that will support you, a Resurgence facilitation team. There will be a Resurgence facilitation team, a Resurgence facilitation desk where all these business plans will be processed. You will be given an opportunity to refine those based on the input from the specialists that you will find from the Resurgence desk up to the point where we have the conference. Lastly, Program Director, we need to formulate a joint strategy between ourselves. I'm talking about different cities in the continent and the Resurgence, to ensure that we expand the reach to the African cities across the globe. The representation could have been better. We should have had more cities from the continent and from the diaspora, and we need to sit down and strategize how we do that particular expansion. Those were the 11 points that we discussed that are meant to take this program forward, and we are happy to share them with you. Of course, if you have any further ideas that you have fermented during the discussion, you are more than welcome to share. That was the first part. Then on closing, if I may, or I guess the Reverend wanted to say something.
Yeah, if I could, Honorable City Manager, a couple of things. I think on the business side, what I would like to do, sir, and I will leave the Durban side, the Africa side to you. Can I ask from the delegation, as it relates to putting together a bicontinental business summit team to kind of work through how these businesses can work together bicontinentally? So I'm going to ask if Dr. Thomas, if you would serve, and if Attorney Eric Darko would serve. And I'm also going to ask if Josiah Williams will serve and represent the delegation side. And you don't have to make any commitments now, City Manager, but at whatever point you decide, your team, so that these individuals can talk together, and all the businesses here that have interest in doing business with the businesses there, we can start linking those businesses together. And if I could make two other sets of appointments quickly. Just on the education side, I want to make sure we do not drop the ball on the 67 students that were adopted. So I'm going to ask if on our side, if one of our education administrator, Dr. Rosser, would lead the coordination on our side to make sure that we facilitate the process and ensure that we make sure that that piece is going. On the development side, the land development side, which I also want us to make sure that we're moving, can I ask you, Patrick, if you and Sharai would kind of lead our side? So those are three pieces that I want to make sure that when we walk out of here, those are tightly in place. And obviously, we want to now start doing a lot of planning. Everything we laid out, I don't believe in just having conferences and meetings and sessions. I believe that at the end of the day, we really want to get results. And can I ask maybe Senator, maybe you and I, and maybe Representative Laura Hall could kind of work with maybe a solid team on the Durban side, clergy and government leaders, I think would be good, so that we talk about, in the U.S., what we have created is a 12-step program. Almost every corporation we deal with in America these days have a 12-step program. You want to do business in the black community? How many blacks are on your board? Are you advertising in black media? Are you doing business and contracts with the black businesses? How do we make sure that those kinds of initiatives, one of the reasons why Atlanta has one of the largest percentage of black businesses in America, it is because Mayor Maynard Jackson way back then says, we don't even care to build a airport in this town unless 20% of all the contracts are going to black businesses. So I want us to kind of help with a foundation group that will help talk through some of those issues as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well said and fully supported. There's one particular point that Reverend said, over the next 10 years, we must target to get an investment of $4 billion US into this program. And I calculated it in rands. I came up with about 182 billion rands. Imagine what that could do to change the lives of African people. So these are the kind of targets that we are going to be chasing on an ongoing basis. Now to closure. Thank you very much to the program director. Thank you. I've already appreciated my sister, Lynette. Thank you very much, Reverend Dylan. Thank you very much to the speakers, including the senators who took part, and all the speakers, the vice president, former vice president of Zambia. And I want to thank all the business people that have taken their time to come to Durban. I want to confirm that we have experienced love. We have experienced love. I want to say that we love you and we are one. This is your home and welcome back home. We truly appreciate the fact that some of you have gone and seen the abject poverty under which our people live in places like Khayelitsha, and they are prepared to lend a helping hand to help deal with that poverty. I'm saving last to appreciate our mayor, Councillor Nonkosi, Councillor Klaba. He has been with us right from the beginning, even during the cocktail parties. He stayed with us until the cocktail parties were done. Nonkosi, we appreciate you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You are fully behind this program, and we know that you are a struggle veteran yourself, so it's not difficult to see why you are so enjoined to this process, because it touches what you have spent most of your life fighting for. To the members of the clergy, the people who love the faith in the gospel of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, when we started it, we were very clear and we were very unashamed in saying the foundation of this conference is the noble gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Can I hear people clap hands? Because we have a just a judge who knows that we are beautiful, a judge who knows that we are kind, a judge who knows that we are capable, a judge who fights for us all the time. That is why we are so determined, ladies and gentlemen, that we decided to say the people who have faith, who define it as the substance of the things hoped for and the evidence of the things not yet seen. The 4 billion rands, the 4 billion US dollars that Reverend Dylan spoke about, by faith we receive it. We receive the economic emancipation of most loved African people, and that I'm saying it by faith in Jesus Christ. I want to thank the intercessors who prayed with us. We assembled a team of intercessors, Pastor Zincume, Gcobisa class. I saw her, I'm not sure if she's still here. They prayed for this conference right from the beginning. They prayed it. They said, we know that Pastor N.J. Sitole, Pastor Rally Kholela, said that the revival of the gospel of Jesus Christ will start in Durban, and that is why it is starting with the resurgence. We are saying this is the beginning of the revival of the gospel, and for it to spread throughout the continent and throughout the country. And indeed, we are on the right path to do that. Ladies and gentlemen, without much further ado, I think I'm done thanking everyone. I started off by saying protocol observed in case I didn't mention all people, but I still want to confirm that I love them with a kind heart. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, City Manager, for those closing remarks. City Manager, you much like Father Christmas today, have been handing out gifts to some of our visitors. And there is a panel that was here just before lunchtime, Mr. Eric Applegreen's panel. If the guests of that panel are in fact still here, please can you make your way to the stage? We do have your tokens of appreciation as well. If they have left, we will ensure that they get them on behalf of the city, because by then everybody had broken for lunch. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings today's two-day conference to a close. There is, of course, still the weekend's events. Please do enjoy those. If there are any items of lost and found, please go to the reception desk and to the delegate registration desk to go and check if they have in fact been handed in. Earlier on, somebody came to hand me a car key. There have been earphones found. A phone has also been found in one of the bathrooms as well, etc. So if you are missing anything, ladies and gentlemen, please be so kind as to hand it in. Please also be so kind as to hand in your lanyards and the tags that go in with them as well. We did speak about a circular economy here and a green economy, so we'd appreciate if you can hand those back as well, if it's as possible, as well as you head on your way out. Thank you to the exhibitors. I think that's another very important group of individuals that, whilst some of them may already be here or not, we have to say thank you to them for being here the last 2.5 days, sharing their goods and services with us all, and hopefully you caught the disorder, the compulsive shopping disorder that we spoke of this morning as each of you leave. I'm going, pardon, Miss Laura Hall. Miss Laura Hall, there she is in the front row. I'm being asked by the Reverend to call you up to the stage at this point in time. Thank you. All right. Miss Laura Hall, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who were not here yesterday, or perhaps don't recall, is the president of the National Black Caucus of State Legislatures in the United States, a formidable woman, and we are really delighted that she is here and amongst us. Ms. Hall, I have the same problem you have about standing behind those buildings of a lectern, but perhaps you can stand just a little bit for the senator and just share the words that the Reverend has called you to share with us as we break.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So you've had a wonderful last 2 days. I am honored to be here and to be a part of this. I stand before you thanking you on behalf of my grandparents who lived next door to me. But my grandmother who watched me every day when I came from school and said, "What did you learn?" My parents who stressed that I would get a good education so that I could live a better life than they did because they were sharecroppers. My third grade teacher who said to me, "You are such a pretty girl and you are so smart. And if you work hard, you can be somebody." I thank you on behalf of Mrs. Pauline Thompson, who saw me walking the street after graduating from high school and said, "Vandiver," which is my maiden name, "what are you going to do?" And I said, "When I get some money, I'm going to college." She says to me, "Write this letter to the president." I sent the letter to the president. Of course, I received the letter back. The president says, show up with $100. I stand before you today because of individuals just like you in this audience. And today, after hearing and being a part of these activities, you've also are ready to go on that trip to do whatever you'd like to do. You've been given all of the materials that you need. That lunch that my grandmother used to pack when we would travel from South Carolina to New York, chicken, plain cake, all of that. You have all of those things that you need for this trip. I thank you on behalf of all of those individuals that caused me to stand before you here in Durban, South Africa. Thank you. And so as you leave on your journey with all of the information that you've just received, I wish for you a safe, happy, and thankful trip. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Hall, for those words. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not sure if there are still parking tickets, but if you have any issues with that as well, you will be assisted on your way out. You have been a wonderful audience, a patient audience. It's because the world we're in has really reached a tipping point for us individually and collectively. And this new normal that we're in isn't working, because if it was, we wouldn't be here. We would be where work and things were working and happening. So I think past the resolutions as well, we need to focus on some deep cleaning of our socialization, our patterns, our systems, and even how we participate in the work of, bridging inequality and being accountable and responsible citizens. And with that in hand, it also means that we've got to look very, very, very carefully at our own thinking and mindsets, how value systems, our own and others, have been twisted, and also start to tap into that listening and learning is also going to help us unlearn and expand our horizons through some of these perspectives that we're going to get. And what I hope that we have is also repositories past the actual think tank of just experts perhaps, and functional bodies and policymakers, where as active citizens, we can contribute to this rebuilding process. Because I think today we've only touched on the surface, and the future is going to depend on us being willing to go deeper, to work a little bit harder, unfortunately, but also within ourselves and at every root cause and every community, at every fault line, and right through the value system in ourselves, but also the value systems that we have to exist and in around. May indeed the force be with us all. Have a wonderful evening and a weekend, and good night.
And may I just encourage, I'm not sure if the exhibit stand is still open, for those who still want to just go